Hi, this is the fourth installment of our Letters to the Church at Quarantine. One of the great joys of my life is being able to be part of a ministry in our local jail. I'm the chaplain there, been for quite some time. And we go through the book of John a lot. It's such a blessed book. Jesus there gets to speak so deeply in such powerful ways. But one of the joys is explaining to the men and the women there that I really don't preach any differently between the jail or my own church pulpit or to myself. Because all of us struggle with the same stuff. We struggle with the self. And breaking the spell of the self is such an important moment. That's when we come to know we need a Savior. One of the great scriptures that I'd like to share and teach from is John 11. And it's helpful now during this time of coronavirus. So let me share it with you. In John 11, it starts this way. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Bethany is sort of Jesus' home away from home when he went into Jerusalem. And there, as it's going to tell us, were a family of three siblings, Lazarus, his sisters Mary and Martha. Jesus often stayed with them. He loved this family and these three. The sisters sent word to him. He was preaching quite some distance away from Bethany when word got to him, and the following happens. So the sisters sent word to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. When Jesus heard this, he said, This sickness is not to end in death, but for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by it. This event was happening to glorify Jesus. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister Mary and Lazarus. It's interesting. Jesus loved them, and the next sentence says, So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he then stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. He deliberately did not run to the side of his friend who was so physically ill. And then after this, he said to his disciples, Let's go to Judea again to see Lazarus. He said this, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go so that I may awaken him out of sleep. The disciples then said to him, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he'll recover, right? Sleep is good. A little NyQuil, some fluids. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he was speaking of literal sleep. One of the reasons that we love the Gospels, and C.S. Lewis pointed to their integrity, is that the protagonists, the main people who would benefit from the story, so often portrayed as clueless. They don't know what's going on. And here they don't. And it's comforting for those of us who struggle sometimes to understand what God is up to. It shouldn't be foreign to the believer to sometimes wonder, God, what are you doing? And so Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe. Seeming to imply that if he was there, Lazarus wouldn't be dead. But then he finishes, let us go to him. Skipping ahead, when Jesus came near Bethany, he found that he'd already been in the tomb 4 days. Lazarus is 4 days dead, beyond 3 days, beyond that third day sort of beautiful symmetry. He's graveyard dead. He's stone cold dead. And when he gets near town, Bethany being near Jerusalem, they discover that just 2 miles apart, Jerusalem to Bethany, many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary out of Jerusalem to console them concerning their brother. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary stayed at the house. Martha gets to Jesus even before Jesus gets to town, and that'll be made clear even in just a little bit. Martha is a get-her-done gal. Now, you can look up differences between Martha and Mary. It's fascinating. It's not where I want to go today, but just for a second, Martha's the one who makes the foods, plans the arrangements. It's Martha who gets upset when they have a dinner party with Jesus, and Mary hangs out with Jesus by the piano, so to speak, while Martha does the dishes. Churches need Marthas and Marys, and Marthas and Marys often, struggle. They love the Lord with all their heart. They have different gifts. They serve differently. They worship differently. They love differently. And Jesus speaks differently to both of them. The irony is they're about to ask the same question differently. But somebody's got to do the dishes too, right? Now, these women, in their different response, Jesus reaches out to them differently. So Mary doesn't come to Jesus. She stays back. We don't know why. It's hard to speculate. But Martha comes to meet him. And is Mary brooding? Is she mad? Is she unaware that Jesus is there? It's all possible. But Martha declares two true things. She says to Jesus this, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And just studying this week, after the many times of teaching this, that's a truth, it seems to me. What she says, Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. He has the power of healing in him. And that's also why it appears in the scripture that Jesus waited. Jesus let him die physically. How can God let us die? Because physical death is not our biggest problem. Physical death on earth frightens us. It concerns us. It entails so many things, but it's not our biggest problem. Our biggest problem is separation from God. Our biggest problem is the self. We'll get to that. But she says this, even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. And Jesus said, your brother will rise again. And Martha, who's a really good theologian, but a bit of a legalist, she said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. Will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? How can you die and not die? How can you both live and die and not die and still live, right? Because there are two deaths. The body dies, but the spirit lives. Better, I should say there are two lives. The spirit does not die. In John 14, when Jesus says, in my Father's house there are many rooms, I will come and take you to be with me so that where I am you may be also. The Father's house. In studying physics, I love to speak this wherever I go, just talking about the body and light speed and the expanding universe. We live in a universe that's expanding. What's it expanding into? For a balloon to be blown up, there has to be a bigger room in which the balloon is expanding. For the universe to expand, there has to be a bigger place into which it expands. That's the Father's house. And we live in the bubble of time. God is timeless. God is called light. At light speed, even Einstein proved that there is no time in a vacuum, right? And so we're beginning to see what God is talking about. Mass can't go light speed. We need to die. We have to drop this mass that the spirit might be with the Father and receive the new body. Sure, the resurrection on the earth, that'll all happen. But when we die, the us that's us, the me that's me, the you that's really you, that longs and hopes and lives, that if it has an amputation doesn't lose a bit of the you that's you, that you is a spirit. And will go to be with Jesus in the Father's house. That's how you can die and not die. The body has to die. In fact, it's a gift on this side of the brokenness that we die so that we may live forever with the Lord. And so Jesus is this, and he says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? When she heard this, Martha calls her sister Mary, saying secretly, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when Mary heard it, she got up quickly and was coming to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, when they saw Mary get up quickly, they went out and followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. So when Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Same question Martha asks, just differently. Same words. Lord, if you had been here, I like to ask people that go through Bible studies with me to think about it as an actor. If you're playing the role of Mary, how would you have said these words? Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. If you're directing the play, how would you counsel the actor to say it, knowing that Martha asked the same words? How would you show the difference of their emotion? That being said, watch what happens next. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit, and he was troubled, and said, Where have you laid him? How would you say Jesus' words if you were leading this play? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. If you ever want to know how God feels about your mourning, your pain, your need, your struggle, know this: Jesus, the Son of God, wept. So the Jews were saying, see how he loved him. And he did love him. That's what the passage begins with. He loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus, and he let Lazarus die. He let Martha and Mary suffer. See how he loved him. But some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man also from dying? For some, death is so offensive that they accuse God of it. But this is God telling us a deeper truth. So Jesus, again, being deeply moved within, some of the translations say angered, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and the stone was lying against it. Jesus said, remove the stone, Martha. And the sister of the deceased said to him, Lord, by this time there will be stench, for he's been dead 4 days. Jesus said, did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the people standing around, I said it, so that they may believe. See, the work of God, according to John 6, is that you believe. If you want to know why anything's happening in the world, if you want to hand it over to Jesus like that 5 loaves and 2 fish, it's so that you believe. Because by believing Jesus is who he says he is, you come into communion with God, and your spirit comes alive, you're born again, and you will never die. It's all about belief. When he said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth! And the man who died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around him with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. Therefore many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he had done believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them the things Jesus had done. I would say these things. Take whatever you have, like Martha and Mary did, take it to Jesus. Let his timing, though, secondly, be enough. Let his timing rule the day. You can still say, Lord, where are you? You can have lament. The Bible's full of lament. We just take it to Jesus, much like our first letter. We talked about pushing those 5 loaves and 2 fish. They can't feed 5,000. Give it to Jesus. He has a way of feeding and having more left over. Be alert when Jesus has come to you and is speaking to you in events and things that would seem like circumstances. But Jesus might be speaking to us. We don't have to know why a thing is happening to see Jesus at work within it. Fourth, physical death is not our enemy. It isn't. Do not fear death as a believer, but let death cause you to believe. 5, belief on Christ is the work of God. If you're caused to believe, then Jesus has woken your ears. Lazarus was stone cold dead. When Jesus said that out, Lazarus didn't even have the ability to hear. God had to give him the ability to hear. If you read the word and it leaps off the page, God is already at work, giving you the ability to hear his commands, to believe. You still need to believe. 6, the earth is not our home. Lazarus died of something else. Beware of preachers, teachers, products that promise you a better this life. It is not our home. Jesus' good deed, number 7, was one of the direct causes of his death, and he knew it. It's partly why he wept, I think. He knew in doing this, the people wanted to kill now Lazarus and Jesus. The people who hated the agenda of God tried to kill the Son of God, and in so doing brought about the plan of God. And finally, don't be afraid. Believe. Whether your death is 1 week away from coronavirus, or 30 years away, or 90 years. What you have between this moment and then, by believing, is time to bear fruit, time to have fellowship. So believe. But the result is the same. We will all die. And to the believer, Jesus will come and take us to himself. Thank God that we'll die. Thank God that we're going to the Father's house and not the lake of fire. And right now, if you can hear my voice, the choice is yours. Do you believe? I pray that you do. That's our fourth letter to the church at Quarantine. I hope it's a blessing to you. Go back and look at John 11 and talk to the Lord as you do so. Thank you.